This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, Justin.
Hey, man.
So we have a few weeks ago, we had an amazing guest because you recommended one of your geeky things that we talked about was the documentary, The China Hustle.
Yeah, I happened to come across it after Luck and Coffee crashed. I started looking into things a little bit, and I happened to come across that movie. I watched it. I just reached out to Dan David from Wolfpack Research just from after watching the movie to see if he wanted to come on the show, and he agreed. We had him on the show. We got to discuss that, and I think there might be an opportunity to bring somebody else on from that film.
No way! Yeah. I would love that. Tell me more. Can you tell me more after our theme song?
I can tell you more after the theme song, but first, I'm Justin Womack,
and I'm Andros Sturgeon, and we are the Marketing Geeks.
Marketing Geeks.
Putting off replacing your window treatments because you think it's complicated? At Blinds.com, we spent 30 years proving it doesn't have to be. And right now, our Spring Black Friday sale makes it easier than ever. Whether you want to DIY it or have a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we've got you. Free samples, real design experts, and zero pressure. Just help when you need it. Shop up to 45% off site-wide. Huge savings on doorbusters. Plus a free professional measure now during the Blinds.com Spring Black Friday sale. Rules and restrictions apply.
If you've got spring fever, Lowe's has the cure. During SpringFest, make your landscape stand out with 3 free bags of Miracle-Gro 3/4 cubic foot garden soil when you buy 3. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances to keep clothes, food, and dishes fresh all season long. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 4/22 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
Justin, who do you have for us?
That's right. Today we have the other most, I would say, the most prolific featured person in the movie The China Hustle. So we had Dan David on the show back in May, and now we're going to have Carson Block. And Carson Block is the founder and chief investment officer of Muddy Waters Capital, LLC, which is a manager of private funds focused on activist investing. Since 2010, research published by Muddy Waters and its predecessor firm has identified 7 emerging markets-based companies that were subsequently delisted by various regulators. Mr. Block was named to the Bloomberg BusinessWeek 50 most influential in global finance list in 2011. And prior to Muddy Waters, he started the first self-storage company in China, Mainland China, and he co-authored the book Doing Business in China for Dummies. He's also practiced law with Jones Day in Shanghai, People's Republic of China, and he received a Juris Doctorate from the Chicago Kent College of Law in 2005 and a BS in business in 1998 from a large university in California. That's very cryptic. Please welcome to the show, Carson Block. Carson, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for being on the show. And just real quick, if to our 7 listeners, if you haven't seen The China Hustle, I'm serious, stop what you're doing, stop the podcast, go watch The China Hustle on Netflix, and then come back here because everything is so relevant and there's so much happening.
And for clarity, it's available on Netflix internationally. In the U.S., it's on Hulu for free right now if you have a Hulu subscription. Go check it out. Or you can find it on Prime. You can find it in all these different networks. But yes, Carson, to kick it off, I mean, can you elaborate a little bit on that bio that we kind of opened with here and just tell us a little bit more? I mean, maybe also define what an activist short seller is, because that's kind of the term that I hear to describe you a lot.
Sure. So, all right, where to start? Okay, activist short seller. Traditionally, a short seller is just somebody who's betting that a stock is going to go down. Usually that's, short sellers they would bet that a company that's a melting ice cube, the stock's going to go down. So they're just in a secular business decline. So you short it. And if you're right, the stock will trade lower. And that's a niche, but we are a niche of a niche. And that is, we focus on companies that are oftentimes we focus on companies that are committing fraud or are misrepresenting their financials or other material information to investors. So the category of legal fraud. So we've actually, I've got to update that bio. We got our 8th delisting of an EM company. So when we deal with in that land, like that's where they're just making everything up, or, you know, the financials. But yeah, like fraud is honestly for schmucks. I mean, you can run a company and really present financial statements that have little bearing or have little tie to reality, but do it within the rules and not really risk prison time. Although,
or your presidency,
prison time either. So let's call a spade. You know, everything's consequence free.
So in the movie, you were really the first person to uncover what was happening in China, and just to give a little bit of background here. So Dan, the movie kind of features a lot of Dan David from Wolfpack Research, and he talks about how a lot of the hedge fund managers in 2008 had kind of lost a lot of their money, and they were looking for ways to make it back. The China companies were a booming economic opportunity that pretty much every company that people were investing in China were getting huge returns, like 100%, 200%. It sounded like astronomical returns. At some point, you were in China running that self-storage facility, and I think in the movie you said your father had wanted to invest in a company called Orient Paper, and you, because you were spending time in China, decided to do some due diligence and go check it out and see if it was a good investment. And kind of describe that experience, what you found, and also correct me if I said anything incorrect there.
No, that's all correct. I'll fill in a few details, and hopefully this isn't too detailed. But the first time I lived in China was 98. I had just graduated from the large university in California, whose I'm just absolutely horrified by what they've done in subsequent years, which is why I don't say the name publicly. But anyway, I went over to China looking to open up an equity research business. After I was there for 6 months or so, realized it was way too early. Came back to the States, did iBanking at a big bank for 9 months, hated it. Started working with my father in equity research, microcap stocks, and I did that for a few years. And we were just getting lied to all the time by managements of these companies. And so this was 99 through 2002. And at the same time, the biggest companies in the world were blowing up as frauds, like Enron, WorldCom, et cetera. So I just looked at this and I said, you know, I want to be an investor, but this sucks. Like everybody just lies to you. So went to law school thinking I would learn how to better protect myself as an investor. Didn't want to practice law, but I actually really ended up enjoying law school. So took my first gig out of law school in China, in Shanghai, for a large US firm. Did that for a little bit. And then I left, and I was opening up the first self-storage company in mainland China. And I thought, oh, we're going to be huge and raise money and go public, which that didn't come to pass. And I got my ass kicked day in and day out. But doing that really enabled me to see the matrix in China. And I started learning, how easily perceptions could be manipulated. So, for example, our first self-storage facility, the only one, we ended up leasing it space in this redevelopment. It was one of these creative zone redevelopments. And so our building was at the back of the complex. Now, we were leasing space from a landlord who was leasing space from the owner of the building. That kind of situation in China where you have a second landlord is common, and it's a bad situation to be in. We knew that, but the owner of the complex was a large state-owned enterprise, and our landlord who was leasing it from that state-owned enterprise was also this big state-owned enterprise. And this was a pillar project of the district government in Shanghai where it was. And so I went to the opening ceremony before we signed the lease, and the chairman of each of these SOEs got on stage, and big dreams for the future and what have you. And in the district government, the party secretary got on stage. It was all good. Well, it turned out it was all bullshit. It was a total sham. This guy, so our landlord was not a state-owned enterprise. He basically just bribed the board of the state-owned enterprise to let him use the moniker, and then he bribed these guys to enter into the lease. And I think the whole thing was they were all going to steal money together and whatever. But the guy running our landlord was stealing too much money. And so we learned that the owner was going to put him down basically and shut down the whole facility. And when you go through this and you're like, well, everybody here is willing to lie, and it's actually not that hard. Like all you do is you change a business card, you change a sign. Then so it was experiences like that enabled me to, as I said, see the matrix. So at the end of 2009, my father got really interested in these Chinese companies that had listed in the U.S., the microcap ones, and he asked me to take a look at one of them. The first one was Orient Paper. I was back in LA for Thanksgiving, so during that time, we had lunch with the CFO of Orient Paper, and it struck me as an odd setup because this guy was sitting in America. I guess he traveled occasionally to China. I had been out of the markets for 9 years at this point, or 8 or 9 years, and I just remember asking this guy basic questions. The company had just raised money, and they were going to build a new factory. So, how many square meters will the new factory be? I don't know. What do you think? But what's the construction cost per square meter you expect? I don't know. How much will the machinery cost? He couldn't answer any of these questions.
And he's the CFO.
He's the CFO.
Wow.
And so it turns out that this was a common template for these China frauds listed in the U.S., where they would have a CFO. I mean, it's like it's a fake CFO, right? But just somebody to tell the story to American investors. So they would have that person based in America. And at least this guy was originally from Taiwan, so he spoke the language, but that's in China, but that's about it. So anyway, I said to him, I was like, look, man, when we go over and do due diligence early next year, if there's anything Chairman Liu wouldn't want somebody to find out, just make up an excuse for why this business shouldn't happen, all right? Because we're going to look at you guys more closely than anybody ever has. I'm just telling you that. So it's like, oh, I'm sure Chairman Liu wouldn't, Anyway, but they had their chance to back out. They did not back out. So I brought a friend of mine up whose background was in manufacturing, an American entrepreneur. We flew up to see the company in early January of 2010. And we're going through the filings for the first time as we're sitting in the airport in Shanghai. There was a snow delay up in Beijing, so we had a lot of time. We're going through the filings for the first time, and we're laughing out loud repeatedly at the claims, as to what they paid for the real estate. I mean, they were massively inflating what they paid for their real estate. And just everything was a red flag. So look, our assumption going in the next day was that the chairman is stealing tons of money out of this company. But we thought it would be a real business. We were not expecting a fake business. But when we got there, it was far worse than we ever imagined. It was a fake business. And, as we walked into the first factory building, the guy I brought with me, Sean, he leaned over and he whispered, he's like, holy shit, we got him. And it's supposed to be this major paper producer, but there's water everywhere in the workshop, on the tables where the workers are folding the paper. The machinery was likely, it was clearly once belonged to a state-owned enterprise. It had been thrown away.
Now, in the movie, real quick, in the movie, they show footage of this factory. Is that actually footage that you took, or is that even real footage of the building? Because it looks like a dump when they show that in the movie. Yeah.
That's our footage. The drone overflight, somebody else did that. But yeah, they show these in the movie. I think it's Roddy Boyd talking about, heaps of garbage. Those are the inputs. So it's old. They made what this company supposedly made was corrugating medium. So it's that brown paper that when you look at a box, the layers of a box, the stuff that goes up and down like that, that's what they supposedly made. And the inputs for that are old corrugated cardboard. And so they had these heaps of trash just old boxes that have been rained on and pissed on and everything out front. And this is on the balance sheet, just the raw materials is on the balance sheet at $5 million US. So the guy with,
and it's a paper company too. Yeah. It's a paper company like that's soaking wet and with piss and water.
I actually invested in $5 million worth of cardboard once, and but I had to take 5 tons and keep it in my house. That was part of
cardboard futures.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the wave of the future, by the way. So Sean, he's wearing like this really nice Zegna overcoat, but he climbs one of these heaps of trash, looks around for a minute, comes down, and he says, "If this is worth $5 million, the world is a much richer place than I ever knew."
Wow.
And it's just like everything with this company was fake. And afterwards, Sean was also recalling after the visit, he said, because the company had claimed like last year its production was up like 40% or something huge like that. And Sean asked him, he's like, "Well, how did you increase production? Did you add a line?" And as Sean recalled, the chairman was like, "No, process improvements." And so when Sean's recounting this afterwards, he's like, "You were in that workshop. You looked around. Did you see anything new, like a new box or a new bucket? Like, how the fuck do you grow production 40%? Like off of nothing." So anyway, it was a fake company. It was a potential.
And later on, you had so I think I saw this. Later on, you had learned about like these SAIC statements. So China was keeping their own financial records versus what they were reporting to the United States. And I think I'd seen from one of your talks was that it was actually more like 2.5 million in revenue, and they were reporting like 100 million in revenue. Were they even making 2.5? That seems high from what I saw in that video.
All right, yeah. So it's interesting. So because I'd been a lawyer and my practice had focused on M&A and foreign direct investment, like U.S. companies looking to set up joint ventures. I knew, as part of our due diligence process as lawyers, we would always review these files. They're called SAIC files, for State Administration of Industry and Commerce. And SAIC files are a treasure trove of information. So, for example, on Orient Paper, there was an asset verification report that showed that the number of assets, the number of production lines the company had was far fewer than what they were claiming, 6, and it was worth a fraction of where they were carrying it on the balance sheet. But also is very interesting is companies report to SAIC each year their financials. And so we got the income statement from the SAIC files, and it showed that rather than the 103 million US in revenue the company had just reported in its SEC filings for 2009, that the real revenue was, I think, $2.5 million. And what was really interesting about that is for FDI and M&A law in China, SAIC files are just a foundational aspect of that practice of doing due diligence. But what clearly was true was that a lot of the same Western law firms or U.S. law firms would have securities attorneys in Hong Kong or in mainland China that were working on on bringing these companies public in the U.S. But it's like they never heard of SAIC files in the securities law side of the house. So back then I was thinking I feel like there was a really high level decision made by practice heads at the various U.S. firms that work on this stuff to just consciously ignore SAIC files when they were doing this work.
That's incredible. One of the reasons that's incredible is because it is one of the hallmarks of Americans in general is that they love ideas of getting rich really quick, right? And they're also very gullible because there's a lot of get rich quick ideas out there that people fall into, a lot of scams. And so when you have basically a cabal, right, of people who are like, hey, this is a way that we can get a lot of money out of Americans. Let's let them think that they're going to get rich. They send basically like a beard, somebody to just show up and play the CEO and tell them that it's going to be okay. And most Americans will not either check any of this or even get to China. The chances of that happening are very, very slim. So there's this kind of knowledge gap that people fall into because they want the money rather than doing their due diligence. And it's amazing to me that you were one of the first people to do this.
Well, I mean, what was just really, the whole situation was incredible. So, with Orient Paper, right, I thought this was a one-off. Because the only domino that had not fallen for me in terms of trust in the investment ecosystem or process, the only domino that hadn't fallen for me early in my career was that of the auditors. So I thought that auditors were there performing an anti-fraud function, which literally, and I'm not joking, they're not. That's not what they're there for. They're there to ensure that the correct accounting standards are being applied and that the correct accounting standards are being applied correctly. So it's not, they're not here to question everything that management's telling them or to question the accuracy and veracity of the documents that they're given. So I thought Orient Paper was a one-off. We published this report. It went viral. Stocks down 55% the day after we published. I'm still living in China. That was not the reaction I expected. I'm scared shitless. But all of these people began reaching out to me. And these were smart money hedge funds. And they said, hey, this is great. You're the first person to prove that one of these is a fraud. The fraud is endemic. It's systemic. Look at this name. Look at that name. So I just started cracking open 10Ks. And it was the same reaction. I'm just laughing constantly at the silliness of the claims made in these filings. So, it was at that point, it was off to the races. But yeah, I really don't have any explanation for how all of the securities work was done by U.S. law firms that also had FDI M&A practices.
Probably like a Gordon Greco philosophy was involved, is what I'm going to assume.
Yeah, my guess is people were getting very rich, and nobody's doing anything about it. So
I got a quick question. Do you speak Mandarin? You lived in China. Are you fluent in Mandarin, or do you know a little bit? How fluent are you?
So I've been back here for 10 years, but when I left China, my Mandarin was pretty good. I studied it for 3 years in college and 4 academic years. I did. Compressed one.
And are you able to go back to China now, or do you have to wear a disguise? Will they even let you in the country now?
They'll let him in the country, but whether or not they let him out again is a whole other.
I don't think your disguise will work because I think their facial recognition technology is probably super advanced by now.
My guess is that you'd be making Nikes next to a Uyghur Muslim in a few days. So let me ask you this. I just want to know about the time when this broke and all of a sudden, like, you were like, oh, damn, I really stepped in it. You're living in China. What happened? Was there any point where you were like afraid or somebody hassled you? And how did you get back to America after that?
So the irony is, I worked on Orient Paper as a side project for months. I didn't have any clear way of making money on it. I had my self-storage business. I was just struggling to keep that afloat. So I thought maybe if we put this report out there, maybe we'll get engaged by some of these investment banks to do due diligence. Like that, not knowing that, that would destroy their whole entire China business. So anyway, when I released it, it was about 3 a.m, right? I'm tired because I'm in China. So I'm so tired, put it out, see the stock take down a little bit. Did we do that? I don't know. Go to bed. Next day, my father arrives. He's come to visit me in China, but we're going to go see some companies together. And I pick him up, and then, we get in by, 4 p.m., I think, by 9 p.m., the market's open and Orient Paper opens and it crashes. And so my father's there. I'm getting all this inbound email, fuck you, you fucking asshole, fucking dead. And, it's like pretty intense. The next day, my father and I go up to see some other company in Wuxi, I think, which is a little bit outside of Shanghai. So we get there, and I've already been, getting all these emails. Some people are saying like, yeah, this is systemic. Check out these other companies. And we arrive at this other factory, and immediately I notice silver spray paint on the ground, outlines, and I'm like, huh. And later when we would tour the workshop, it's like, oh, shiny new machinery. Like, I see the outlines of that in your driveway. So there was that. So then, we're told how many workers, work there. And I'm like, all right, where do they live? Like, dormitories. Okay. Could you show us the dorms?
No.
And then we get walked off the property, to these dorms. And you see all these women who are waitresses at some restaurant. They're in uniforms walking back and forth.
That got bussed in 5 minutes earlier.
Yeah. And so, well, they clearly weren't factory workers, right? They worked at some restaurant. So it's just like, okay, all right, cool. So, okay, time to go back and meet with the chairman and the CFO. So we go upstairs. The CFO had just arrived by plane from Beijing. And as we walk to the top floor of their offices, all through this glass window, they've got a big room with a bunch of computers, but these computers were Legend computers. There had not been Legend brand computers made for years in China. It was Lenovo, and they were the big CRT monitors, in which even 2010 was a rarity. Everything, and I'm like, there's been nobody working here for years. And so anyway, I haven't had a chance to really discuss this with my father during the meeting, but as soon as it ends, as soon as we get dropped off or we get in our car, I'm like, man, my father's like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I'm like, Bill, I always called my father by his first name. I'm like, Bill, this thing's a total fucking fraud too. Well, how do you know? Are you sure? And I start going through it, and it's just
so did you secure a short position in Orient Paper before publishing that report, or did you just publish the report to see what happens and then later on started doing that formula of shorting and posting these kind of reports on the frauds that you found?
So yeah, it was something in between because at that point I'd done well for myself financially before I moved to China, and by the time 2010 came around, I had no more money of my own. I'm borrowing from my father every month just to pay rent on the apartment. So, I scrounged together $2,000 and Sean had $2,000 and we bought $4,000 worth of put options on Orient Paper. Now, I wanted ONP to think this guy probably has some real money, probably made some real money in the trade, because I wanted them to not sue me, because I really didn't have a good way of dealing with that. Even though the truth was on my side, it's just I didn't really have a good way of paying for lawyers. So it was a bit of a bluff on my part.
But weren't you a lawyer, though? You were a lawyer. Come on.
I was a lawyer, but I represented myself right after I graduated law school. I was suing my landlord in Chicago because he wouldn't give back the deposit. And I succeeded in having my case dismissed because I didn't fill out the wrong fucking form in the court. I took Civ Pro, but they don't teach you this form is for that. And once the judge, orders you have, issues an order, you actually have to enter it yourself. So I was not competent to represent myself in anything. It's one of the realities of law school. So, but it's good. They make you pay for 3 years. So anyway, that was what it was like when we released the report. My father and I flew the next day to see another company in Wuhan. And that's when Orient Paper issued its response saying that my father and I had tried to shake the company down for money and that they said no and that this was revenge. And so now they're smearing my father and they're lying more. And what had initially been, some fear on my part of, oh my God, we're living here, or my wife and I are still living here in China. And these guys are, all these people are yelling and screaming. Jim Cramer's calling me a fraud on TV. This guy.
Not Jim Cramer. No, not
Jim Cramer called you a fraud?
Yeah, Jim's like,
I would put that on my resume, dude. That's
that should be on your website on the homepage.
I'll never forget. I'll never forget Jim Cramer yelling at the top of his lungs, "Do not de-invest in Bear Stearns. The stock market is gonna be fine." And in 2006, that
you're
not supposed to remember that, Andros. You're not.
I remember everything. That. I'm like a fucking
well, Jon Stewart did a great riff on Cramer for that. But, I've gone from feeling the weight of the world and fear and, regret, like, should I have done this openly? Once they said, my father and I tried to shake them down, then it was like,
it's on.
All right, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Like, we're going at it now. Like, fuck you. You crossed the line. And it just turned to rage. And that's honestly what fueled a lot of the, maybe the first year, 2 years of what I did was I came out of China with a lot of scars. Like, I really came to hate these guys who, think the rules don't apply to them. And that was building upon scars from the first time around my career. So a lot of what I was doing the first couple of years, I'd say, was really just controlled rage.
Well, you know what? Pissed off beats scared any day of the week. So good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Definitely.
Now, what does it say about like the state of like the human race too? I mean, you're talking about a systemic problem, not just in China, but I mean, in general business. We've talked about on the show, like John Ronson's work in the psychopath test and how people that are considered psychopaths tend to rise to like positions of like CEO or power, lots of different types of positions.
And there's got to be people in the U.S. government who know this shit's going on, right? I mean, there has to be.
Oh, I'm sure. But I mean, what do you? I mean, what's your take, real quick here though, on this? Like, is that what you're seeing? I mean, are these people like actually lacking in empathy, and just is that why they're so greedy and able to kind of pull off these scams? Or like, I mean, what's your take on the human condition of these people?
Okay, well, I think it varies. You definitely have the psychopaths, especially when you talk about U.S. companies. You definitely have CEOs who are psychopaths.
Yeah,
I'm not, it's a small number, but there are people where we're like, okay, that person's a psychopath. Among American CEOs, though, and just the management culture now is so broken that, as I'm fond of saying, every CEO of a publicly traded company feels like it's his God-given right to be able to dump at least $50 million worth of stock. And they're the ones who aren't necessarily crossing legal lines and outright lying, but the culture is so broken and just so corroded that, when we pick on them, they're probably thinking, and they're right to think this, like, shit, man, why me? I'm not doing anything that, all these other guys aren't doing. Like, why are you singling me out? I mean, my answer is, like, we're shorting you, and I wish I could go and short everybody, but, just your number came up, I guess. But that's one aspect. And I would say what compounds that is, and I felt this was the case before the financial crisis, but it really was the case coming out of the financial crisis, is there's just a tremendous amount of insecurity that people feel around the world. And I think so many people are effectively, playing just to stay one more day in their jobs and not thinking really long-term, because nobody, like, we see the bottom fall out of people's lives and careers routinely. And so I think that embedded within so many people, and I'd say this is definitely the case among CEOs, it's the case among auditors, lawyers, the professional class, is, I think, a tremendous insecurity that really breeds this short-termist behavior. And I don't know how we get off that treadmill, because, the more short-termist we collectively act, the more things do blow up, and really, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't know what slows down the treadmill to the point that a majority of, people in these spaces can feel like, I'm okay if I can't report blowout earnings this quarter or next quarter. I'm building a business or I'm rebuilding a business. I have a long-term vision, and I think people will buy into that. But we're so far from that right now.
And I personally, I think a lot of it has to do with a few things, but one of them being that people who there seems to be some sort of feeling in America that is being pushed up against. I mean, this is what everything is about right now, is that there's a classist system. And I think that when people get really wealthy and have a lot of power, the thought of like, well, it's all about me. I just got to make sure I get mine. And if it screws over someone who's not me or not my tribe, then, oh, well, they couldn't afford what I can afford and I earned it, right? So I think that there's, when you look at the American dream, I believe that it came true and they elected him he's in the White House right now. That is the American dream personified at this point. So the question I have for you is like, can you contact Elizabeth Warren, who's probably going to be Treasury Secretary, and see if she can appoint you to a position that takes care of this shit? I mean,
yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ, imagine the freak out on Wall Street if they chose a short seller to have a senior role at the S.
Yeah.
No, speaking of that real quick, because as a short seller, I was looking at a few articles on you. You've been described as widely feared, and even the mention of your company's name can send a company's shares south in a hurry. But you take a lot of heat as a short seller. I mean, I think you're probably being called a lot of names. You're being, I'm sure people are digging into your past, looking at ways to attack you personally. So how do you deal with that? And one of the things, one of your team members actually forwarded me an article from a few years ago where you were shorting, I believe, a certain casino stock. I don't remember the name of the stock, but somebody posed as a Wall Street Journal reporter. I believe it was Wall Street Journal. And they weren't, and they were trying to, it looked like they were trying to get intel on what you knew or what your company knew about their company so that they could get ahead of whatever you were going to do to short them and try to combat it. So, how do you deal with all that?
Well, it's complicated, I guess. Okay. So number one, we start fights. It's not
True.
These companies, all of a sudden unfairly pick on us, pick on me. I mean, you got to know what you're up against, and accept it. Number one. There are lines that I do not cross. So we use investigators, but we use them to go and stake out factories, to see what the traffic is. I mean, we don't dig into management's personal lives. Even if I feel like the manager, the CEO is a psychopath or, just is doing horrible things, like, to me, there's a line there. Now, those guys, I think, try to cross it after we published on a company called Sino-Forest, investigation firm had been engaged by either Sino-Forest or Sino-Forest's management to dig into my background. And so I assume a number of companies, a number of guys over the years have tried to do it. I don't know. I mean, like, maybe my porn tastes are like too middle of the fair.
You're that squeaky clean.
They cave it, but whatever. Like we haven't heard it, so hopefully I'm reasonably decent guy. Now, what you referred to was this incident. The company was actually called Casino. It's a French company. They compete with Carrefour and with hypermarkets, and they're controlling shareholders, a guy named Jean-Charles Naury, and Naury is very establishment in France and very well networked. And we went through the ringer in France in terms of an investigation by the regulator. And ultimately, after 4 years, the regulator issued a press release this past December saying that they weren't going to take any action against us. And that was actually a pretty big deal because there were people at the regulator in senior roles we think like really wanted to just crush us for fucking with their boy. And one of the things that happened during this whole process was started getting pinged by somebody whose name was William Horobin from the Wall Street Journal. but he was always emailing from a Gmail address.
Red flag number one.
I think I could see that happening once or twice, but repeatedly, and kept asking questions, over email about, the AMF investigation and what our plans for casino were. So pretty early on, it seemed, something seemed really off. Then anyway, and so what we ended up doing was we ended up checking with, so William Horobin is a real Wall Street Journal reporter. At the time, at least, he was based in Paris. So we ended up having somebody reach out to him and ask, hey, have you been trying to contact Muddy Waters and, Carson Block? And he's like, nah, I don't cover casino. That's somebody else. No, I have no interest in that. So, okay, we knew this was, bullshit. What to do with it? And, I want to pat myself on the back here because I said, listen, we could make some hay of it right now, but let's just hang back. Let's see if these guys, whoever they are, can fuck themselves up somehow. And that's exactly what happened. So eventually the email came through to our PR rep saying from, fake Bill Horobin saying, I'm going to be in New York next week. Could I sit down with you? And actually, sorry, in New York this week. This was like Monday that this came through. My PR guy, sent this to me and he said, what should I say? And I'm like, dude, why don't you offer him a meeting with me? Tell him that Carson happens to be in town and can sit down with you Thursday. I was like, I doubt he'll take the meeting. And if he agrees to it, I doubt he'll show up. But hey, so went back to him. The guy responded, yes, that'd be great. I'm like, oh man, this is on. So I gotta get out to New York quickly. And I got a security team together because
good idea.
Who knows what's gonna go down here. And so I've got guys to provide security for me, but I also have guys at the entrances. So I named the hotel, the Pierre Hotel. And so I've got guys at the entrances who are ready to follow this dude whenever he leaves. And anyway, I'm sitting there and, I've got somebody over my shoulder. We also have a reporter from the Financial Times at an adjacent table. And because I sent that to them just beforehand, like thinking, hey, maybe you guys want to cover this because they've done a lot of coverage of, Carson Block versus Nalri and, et cetera. So this guy comes in and he sits down and he's got, his English is good, but, he's got a very distinct French accent. It's like, hello, I am Bill Horobin. I am from the UK, but I've been living in France so long, they say I have lost my English accent. I'm like,
Very convincing. Very convincing.
That's so strange that shit could happen, huh? So anyway, I said, all right, my PR guy is not here yet, because my PR guy wasn't going to go anywhere near this meeting. Like, so, maybe let's just hang out for a few minutes and, until he gets here. So, I mean, this is so amateur hour, but like the guy doesn't want to kiss. He just wants to go straight in, right? So he's like, oh, in that case, do you mind if I ask you, what is the status of the AMF investigation? And I'm like, all right, hold on. Yeah, you know what? Hang on, Bill. I just got an email. I have to make a trade. I pull my phone out. I hold it up and I just start saying, okay, I know you're not the real Bill Horobin. And so I'm recording this guy. And, his response is, okay, so? And, well.
Yeah, so what?
Tell me who you are. And just like, I am a journalist. I'm, well, if you're a journalist, why don't you give me your real name? Well, you will not take the meeting. I'm like, did Casino send you here? And he's like, and then I look over at the reporter from the FT. I was expecting him to come over to the table and ask some questions. He had been told not to do that, but I look over at him and fake Bill Horobin glances there. He sees that I know this guy, looks behind my shoulder. He's like, okay, that guy might see the guy on the balcony. And he's like, he realizes he's got to get the fuck out. And he got up and booked. And the one professional aspect of his conduct that day was that he knew where the entrance was in case he had to get the fuck out. And he got out so quickly that, my guys couldn't follow him. They just couldn't communicate from the balcony to the door quickly enough. So anyway, I had the video, and I'm flying back to San Francisco, and my initial thoughts are, man, I'm going to blow this dude up, like all over social media. But then I started to calm down. I'm like, listen, he's probably just some functionary working for an investigation firm that blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I had uploaded the video, and it was sent off to some people in France who are in the investigation field. And when I landed, the person I'd sent it to said, he's like, all right, listen, when these guys got back to me in France, they said, like, I'm not comfortable giving you this guy's name. I was like, what? Like, Carson, he's actually a serious guy. Like, you're shitting me. Like, he's a serious guy. He's got a deep.
And he doesn't have a French accent.
Brit. MI6. It turns out that he has a really deep background in French intel. He's one of France's leading counterterrorism experts. He'd written several books on terrorism. I mean, at the time, he had over 20,000 Twitter followers. And this guy was so arrogant, he thought that with that public profile, that he could pretend to be a real Wall Street Journal reporter, emailing us from Gmail, take a fucking face-to-face meeting with me, and that I was going to spill all the secrets of, Muddy Waters and Casino to him. I mean, just on paper, he's not a stupid guy, but, the conduct, the actions. Yeah. So anyway, his name is, because whatever, I've already outed him, but Jean-Charles Brissard. So anyway, every now and then I troll Brissard because I'll see him write something about oh, these terrorists are so awful. And, I'm like,
we'll be sure to get him on the show to get his rebuttal on this too.
Is he a Le Pen supporter? Do you know?
Well, actually, no, I'm pretty sure these guys were, right wing, Nauri, I think was a supporter of, Sarkozy.
Uh-huh.
So I think he's in that crowd. But I mean, I don't think they wanted Le Pen. I don't think he's in that crowd. Like, Le Pen is so, is so anti-establishment. So, even Macron, well, actually, I believe, I'm trying to remember who, so Macron ran against Francois Fillon. And I think Fillon and Nauri used the same PR person.
Oh.
So I think that, I'm trying to remember the name of the firm. But anyway, that was the overlap. So I was looking at that election and I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I do not want this guy Fillon to win. I felt like that would be bad for me as far as the AMF goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, what's interesting here to me is that you basically, you're kind of like a financial Batman. You're
super good vigilante.
Yeah. Your superpower is just basically you look for evil and strike it down with this particular skill set that you have. I mean, it's really interesting because it's almost like you also, with the skills that you have, could become very, very rich, like a lot of the psychopaths that get rich using these same methodologies. So what was it in you that decided to take one path versus the other when they were both presented to you?
Well, I don't think you're struggling too much financially, though, are you?
No, I mean, I'm
just kidding.
By most people's standards in the world, I'm pretty wealthy. I mean,
right, but you could have been like part of the uber rich. So what was the line there for you?
I mean, look, from a young age, I believed. Okay, let me really back up here. I grew up in a town in New Jersey that was, very wealthy. Everybody's father worked on Wall Street. And, they all seemed to have the postcard perfect families and houses and memberships. That was not my family. My parents got divorced when I was 6. I was around alcoholism as a kid. I had a lot of traumatic shit happen to me as a result of that. And, and that ended up making me kind of a target for derision as I grew up. I never fit in really. And I guess what I enjoyed doing was I enjoyed pointing out the absurdity and hypocrisy of some of the people around me who came from that perfect, seemingly perfect background and just pointing out, like fucking with them, frankly, like just getting in their faces and fucking with them when I could. And especially when I got to my sophomore, junior years in high school, and I heard all these kids, some of them say like, Jesus, I really need a scholarship to XYZ. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Your house is like 6,000 square feet and, you got like 4 cars and, and like moments of honesty, like Carson, you don't like financially, we're kind of fucked. And seeing that hypocrisy, but also just always having a real distaste for it. I think that's part of it, and then also I just always took seriously this idea that, it takes you a lifetime to build a reputation, a few minutes to burn it. And then the final layer was going to China and, looking around and seeing like, I don't, feeling like I don't like this place. I don't like living in this place because it's just exhausting because everybody, not everybody, but the people who are least willing to follow the rules are the ones who succeed the most. And it just sucks. And so I came back from China with a real respect for the rule of law that we have in this country. And I guess, almost religious about that. So, so I think it was really a combination of mainly those factors that can put me where I am today. So yes, I know the blueprint for a stock promotion or a fraud or whatever, but, A, I don't care about money that much to do it, but B, I mean, you should see me trying to, sell my hedge fund. Like I'm the worst fucking salesperson because I'm just totally honest, and so somebody, potential investor will ask me, well, okay, what are the risks here, beyond, losing money? I mean, what about getting, can I get sued as one of your LPs? And, I think like the salesman answer is like, it'll never happen. Let me tell, but I mean, my answer is like, I think it's remote, but look, man, I can never guarantee that it's impossible. And I mean, and the reality is, look, if it went really badly, we're talking a multi-billion-dollar, verdict, and I'm bankrupt, and you're fucking, endowments wiped out. I mean, like,
sounds great.
That is a great sales pitch. I love that sales pitch.
Can we offer you some marketing advice after this interview?
Well, I got a question here. So, because that you consider yourself not a great salesperson, what was it? The China Hustle movie then that really like catapulted you into the spotlight? Was that the big difference maker? Because in my opinion, if somebody's not great at sales, the workaround is to build these stellar, prolific reputation. And the China Hustle movie would have done that for you, I'm sure. But did that make a huge shift in your business, or were you already like at a certain level and it didn't make a ton, or how did that impact you?
Well, what really, the big boost, when I left obscurity, at least in finance, was in 2011 when we shorted Sinoforce. That was a company that was really widely held. Some huge name. The largest shareholder was John Paulson, and he's the guy whose funds made $40 billion shorting subprime when the financial crisis collapsed, or when the crisis occurred. So that gave me a profile, and that's why I went from, in 2010, I'm a guy running a self-storage facility in Shanghai, that's not even making money, to 2011 being one of the 50 most influential in global finance with, Christine Lagarde and, and Alan Greenspan. It was because of Sinoforce. Now the movie, The China Hustle, it's actually funny. I'm really happy that Dan ended up being the main protagonist. Dan and I are good friends. So Dan was involved with it from inception. He and another guy who's featured in the movie some, John Carnes, I think it was their idea, and they brought it to somebody John Carnes had worked with in the past, and that's how the movie took off. Now, Dan tells me that I was intended to be the main protagonist, and I was the first person they reached out to interview. But I remember having conversation early on with the producer, and she's saying, okay, well, we're going to come out to interview you. How about after that, we get some shots with you and your kids? No. Or your kid? No. What do you like to do? How about we, get some footage of you doing what you like to do? No. At home, with your wife? No. I mean, I was the most cagey, closed off person. And I think
no B-roll.
Yeah. What's that?
No B-roll footage. They want all that B-roll footage while you're interviewing. They play footage of you with your kids and all that.
Right. We did some really lame B-roll of me riding in the back of the SUV they'd rented, listening to Kanye, and it's got my earbuds in. I'm just that was the B-roll footage they could capture. So it obviously didn't make it in the movie. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I just thought I'm going to sit on camera. So it didn't. The irony is, at least this is what Dan said, that, I could have been featured more prominently, but I didn't, it's just not the sort of thing I was comfortable with. And, and with Dan, I do feel like Dan is a much more, he's a much warmer, approachable person than I am. So, and he ended up running for Congress after that movie too.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame he didn't win, but I think he lost to a good opponent. I'm okay with his opponent. But anyway, yeah. So that was the China Hustle. It's a great movie. I'm glad they made it. But yeah, it wasn't. It didn't really. It wasn't a career boost.
So I'd like to take this into a few more current events right now, because I know I was following your Twitter feed for a while here, and you have talked a little bit about Elon Musk and Tesla. And, he's one of our favorite subjects to talk about. So I wanted to just kind of talk about that. One of the things that I saw that you had said is that you're very bearish. I'll use the term bearish on Tesla, but you would never short them because Elon Musk has a habit of pulling rabbits out of his hat, and he also has a habit of getting government bailouts. But talk a little bit about
also
Elon Musk. And
do you think that he is a supervillain, or he's actually masterminding being the legendary hero of the planet?
Or something in between?
No, nothing in between.
Yeah, one or the other. That's it.
I mean, unfortunately, there's nuance there, but I would guess that Elon would probably score pretty high on one of those psychopathy evaluation tests. He's not, in my view, he's not doing any of this to save the planet. I mean, it's self-aggrandizement. But I mean, look, if you can make the world a better place while doing well for yourself, there's no problem. There's no shame in that. I hate the phony bullshit of, I'm doing this for humanity, when it's come on, bro, you got a G6. Let's put it out there. Why are you really doing this?
So what's your feeling on because I think Elon Musk represents a certain type of billionaire class. So what does this say in the much grander sense? What are you sensing from all of this, including Elon Musk?
Well, I mean, look, I don't think billionaire is a pejorative. I wrote an op-ed, what was it, back in last summer, and I was going to try to publish it somewhere, but I asked Dan, David, and a few others for advice on it, and they told me you're going to just infuriate everybody. But the op-ed was a criticism of Elizabeth Warren's demagoguery in going after billionaires, and I said, and basically my point was, look, if you drop billionaire, you could put immigrant in there, and and that's what Trump, it's almost the same words and stuff. But so I don't, per se have a view that, billionaires are bad people. Now, I think the issue is there are some people who become billionaires not because they're doing things that are positive for everybody around them as well as themselves. I mean, look, I think Mike Bloomberg did it the right way. But, there are people who are basically just sucking up wealth from others, and people who cheat, and, people who are predatory capitalists. I think that among U.S. billionaires, that's probably a minority, but, So anyway, like I don't begrudge Elon for that. I just begrudge Elon for the phony, the phony shit about like, oh no, this is never about the money. And, it's always about, or it's just about, saving humanity from itself. And I find, I don't know, I kind of find Elon like more and more grotesque as time goes on.
So what's your take on Neuralink, the brain chip company, where he's saying that you have a surgery to implant a brain chip in your head and it can cure depression and a few other claims that have come out recently. Would you be second in line behind me to get the brain chip on day one, or
it'll come with your COVID vaccine?
Yeah. Well, and my feeling on Elon is that the one thing that he could do to actually prove that he's not a supervillain is get the Starlink internet system online and give free internet to the planet, unfiltered free internet to everybody on Earth, and then I'll go, okay, I'm behind you. But until then, if he's just going to make money off of it,
because that action actually overshadows whatever wrong, I guess.
I think that actually my theory is that if we were able to give unfiltered free internet to every single person on Earth, that would allow people who don't have opportunities to now have an opportunity to learn and start controlling their own finances and become educated and form networks. So I think that global free internet that's unfiltered by any government would actually help humanity. But
I mean, look, it might chill some people out if they could get access to good porn. I mean, I'll put it that way.
It's so true.
It all really comes down to that, and I fully agree with that.
I got a question. Back in May, I remember reading that the Senate passed some sort of resolution to limit the way that Chinese companies were being listed on the stock market. So, some of these, like the style that you described in the China Hustle movie was these reverse mergers. What was that legislation back in May, and did that actually have any impact on what's happening? How prevalent do you see the fraud still on the market? Like how common is that today in August of 2020?
Sure. So I think when we're talking about companies listed in the U.S. from China, I think the vast majority of them are committing fraud to some extent. Now, and you have to really been ensconced in China, I think, to understand why I say this or to feel this, because I can't like offer you this. But my, everything about, from my time in China tells me that the following is the case. So for Chinese and people who do business there, if a company is inventing 20 to 30% of its revenue, that's real. Like, that's fine. Everybody's expected to do that, basically. Like, why wouldn't you do that? 30 to 50, I think, is a gray area in terms of whether we think that that's problematic or not. More than 50 is like, yeah, they're lying. Like, that's a problem. But basically, people, bullshitting 20 to 30% of what they're saying, in terms of a company, and I think that probably, more or less translates into anything they tell you. If it's 20 to 30% completely false, or 20 to 30% is false, like, that's real. Like, that's how much lying, fraud, deception, bullshit is in the environment in China. Now, it's maybe not that different from other emerging markets, except for the fact that we allocate so much money to China. Like, we're not throwing nearly that much money at, countries in Africa, or, even India hasn't received. There aren't many companies from India listed on U.S. markets. So that's really the issue there. Now, in terms of what this legislation was, one of the things that came out of Enron's collapse is the creation of a regulator of auditors in the U.S., the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, PCAOB. PCAOB is supposed to inspect auditors of U.S. listed companies. So if you want to audit a U.S. listed company, you have to register with PCAOB, and then they're entitled to inspect you. I think they do it every 2 to 3 years. Now, China has never allowed for the inspection of PRC-based auditors. And also China created this legal framework that says that only local affiliates of these, of the big four or whatever, only locally registered audit firms are permitted to actually undertake audit work. So simultaneously, China has said, these are the people who will do the audit work, and PCAOB, you may not inspect them. So this was kind of an issue that blew up then in 2011 on the back of the short reports that guys like ourselves had dropped and exposed all this fraud. So it made it, this issue of auditor inspections actually made it into what was called the Strategic Economic Dialogue, the SED, that was carried out at cabinet levels between the US and China. And there was even a case brought before the SEC's own court where the Big Four, their China affiliates, were basically about to be deregistered for 6 months. The practice license is suspended for 6 months, which could have led to delisting of a lot of Chinese companies. But it seems that the Obama administration stepped in and said, you know what, we don't want to press that button. We've got a lot of other things on the agenda here with China. Let's just back burner that, hit the auditors with a $500,000 fine each, which is like maybe the audit fee from one client for a year. And life went on. At the same time, China had cleaned up some of these problem companies by using its banks to finance buyouts of some of the obvious frauds. So China understood U.S. investors very well, and they knew that we had short-term memories. So they cleaned up the problem in 2012. 2014, Alibaba's going to go public. Basically, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, they pull out the knee pads and, they're trying to get the listing. And it worked. And people lined up around the block, basically, metaphorically anyway, to subscribe to the Alibaba IPO. And then that opened the door for more of these China companies to list. And these were generally better frauds, meaning there was more reality there. They were better at committing fraud. The government in China also had locked down a lot of that information we used to get in the SAIC files. So you couldn't just go and pull an SAIC file and prove the company's a fraud. And U.S. investors just wanted a growth story. So a lot of money has continued to flow into them. Now, when Luckin blew up, so there were a couple of voices who were alone in the wilderness on this. Senator Rubio, to his credit, has long been fixated, or I shouldn't say fixated, but he's long been focused on this issue.
Marco Rubio? Really?
Marco Rubio. Look, there are. I'm not a fan of of the guy in office, but the one thing that he did and some other Republicans have done is they moved the needle in terms of how we see China. And I think, look, Obama is the most decent person to hold that office in a number of years, since at least Jimmy Carter, but his China policy was riddled with errors here. And so anyway, so Rubio was pushing this, and after Luckin blew up, it got some real traction in the White House finally, because once COVID hit the U.S., the whole Trump reelection strategy is China, 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 China. So I think it's a combination of Rubio and a few other people probably within the administration pushing it, Luckin and COVID. And so now you got the Senate to unanimously pass the bill. Unfortunately, in the Democratic-controlled House, it hasn't made it out of committee to a vote, but it's the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act, and it would provide that auditors would be deregistered if they have not been inspected for 2 years. So I think by January of 22 by the PCAOB. Now the reality here is that the SEC already has the authority to delist these companies because the auditors have not been inspected. And so that law, there's existing law that has been violated. So this is symbolic, but it's important symbolism. It's better than nothing. But look, I think at the end of the day, China will cave on this issue, and there are two reasons why. Number one, inspecting the auditors is not going to stop. It's only going to be a tiny speed bump in the road for defrauding U.S. investors through these companies from China. Okay, and the Chinese government knows this, and that's why they're basically going to get us to exhaust all of our political will to get this one victory, and then we're going to, everybody's going to say, all right, we can claim victory, fuck it, go home. And like I said, that will not stop anything. That's number one. Number two, these officials from the Chinese government, whether it's the highest levels or, on down to senior local and provincial officials, they all have shares in these US listed Chinese companies secretly through proxies. They have a lot of offshore wealth in these companies. There's no fucking way they would let them get delisted, especially over something as minor as allowing inspections. So at the end of the day, that's the leverage that the US has. I don't know that anybody in policy making circles in the US knows that they have this leverage or we have this leverage. But also, like I said, China's plan, I think, is to give us this ultimately if we push hard enough.
Now, the thing that something you just said sticks out to me, and that's that the Democrats have actually kept a bill in committee, which is kind of interesting because you always hear about Mitch McConnell holding up like the Election Security Acts and all these other things. You don't hear about bills being held up by the Democrats as much. Why do you think they are doing that?
I don't know much about politics. I suppose it's because they think it'd be handing a win to Trump and bringing his China message to the forefront. I guess the bigger question that I've been asking for years is why haven't the Democrats ever picked up the banner on China? I mean, you've had Bernie Sanders and you've had Elizabeth Warren, but aside from that, why isn't it a mainstream position of the Democratic Party that we have some real problems in the relationship with China and we need to push back? So I think that it's because, for reasons that I cannot fathom, that the Democrats have completely ceded the China issue to the Republicans. I think it's because they've ceded it that Pelosi won't let it come up for a vote and give the administration, or what could be perceived as a win for the administration.
My guess, knowing Pelosi, is that she's probably thinking we're going to deal with this, but we can wait, now a few months and even a couple of years on it, because Pelosi knows that if they pick up the mantle, there's enough on that particular subject. There's enough business that the U.S. still does with China, and we're in the middle of a financial dip, an unbelievable dip right now. I think that would rock the boat, because then they could really, the real problem is, and tell me if you feel this way, that if the global economy switches from like the petrodollar to the euro, and China is holding all this debt, it's going to be pretty bad, right?
I mean, well, it's funny because everybody who thought they knew something about economics and markets has been just absolutely perplexed by the past 11 years. So yes, you'd think it'd be bad, but apparently the Federal Reserve can just buy unlimited amounts of U.S. government debt. So I guess if China wanted to stop buying or was going to dump, the Fed would just soak it up. I mean, none of this seems healthy. None of this seems like it works or adheres to the rules of economics. But I don't think the euro would replace the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, because the Eurozone has problems. I mean, internally, it's kind of, people thought it was going to fall apart in 2011. And there are still real strains within the Eurozone.
Oh, yeah.
Banks in Europe are a shit show. So, so the euro, I don't think replaces the U.S. dollar as reserve currency. The RMB is not going to do it either. I think that's all just kind of,
So one other thing I wanted to talk about, since we're talking about these current events, what's happening in Congress, and with the president, is the TikTok and WeChat ban that took place pretty recently. So there was an executive order issued that gave a period, I believe, 90 days for TikTok and WeChat to not only cease all operations in the United States, but also to sell all of their assets. And I'm sure this will be challenged in court. I doubt it'll actually come to fruition before the election. But what is, I mean, is this, do you see this, like if even politics aside, let's say, do you see this as a wise move? Do you think that TikTok is a China data mining? I mean, is it a data mining operation? Is that like what its main purpose is, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that TikTok is a real problem. I mean, I guess the first time that I really thought about this was the realization that Grindr, which is like the gay Tinder, was owned by some obscure company in an obscure part of China in Yunnan province. And and I had no idea until I read I think it was some administration officials or some politicians carping about that publicly, and I thought, holy shit, like this is brilliant on the part of China, and it absolutely is to get blackmail material or material that they could use to compromise people, I don't know, whether in the US or other parts of the world. So I think TikTok, but that was developed by a US company, I believe, Grindr, and it was sold to the Chinese company. TikTok apparently was developed by China. So, I mean, I guess it's pretty impressive if that's the case, that the Chinese company was able to develop something that, became a social media mainstay overnight. But yeah, I have little doubt that that the intention of China, the government, is to, regardless of what the founders of TikTok ever intended, but that they can use this information or try to use it. Now, I mean, maybe the reality of the world is that China hacks everything everywhere. So should you really feel that much more secure, with your data, giving it to any of these other social media apps or any of the other stuff on your phone?
Are you giving it to the Chinese government or the US government? Take your pick.
Yeah, look, everybody's data raping your phone. I mean, this is the bottom line. Everybody's data raping your phone. And China data rapes everybody. So maybe substantively doesn't do anything. But
I just wanted to say, though, real quick, that TikTok acquired a company called Musical.ly. So the whole social media network is based on the Musical.ly, which I think was an American company, and then TikTok or whoever, ByteDance, whatever, acquired Musical.ly and then integrated it with what is now TikTok. So I think it is based on a lot of American technology.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a relief, because I remember, going back to when I lived in China, I used to say, oh, they're trying to encourage innovation, but how can you do that with all this internet censorship? So I started to feel like like I was totally wrong on that they had invented some global social media sensation.
Well, they refined it. They definitely added the AI. So, I mean, if you scroll through TikTok, it's a rabbit hole. And if you just start liking a few things, it starts to feed you the information that will light up your serotonin the most. But so this is the thing. And I was just thinking about this the other day. Like, China took over Hong Kong. Hong Kong was like almost like its own country, and China just basically took it over. And they're getting pretty. There's a lot of bravado being shown around Taiwan right now. In fact, China taking Taiwan is on my apocalypse bingo card for 2020. But that's a serious deal. And then, this information about the concentration camps and how the persecution that's going on. I mean, what's the outcome of all this? What do you foresee? What's your prediction?
I mean, like, really long term, who knows? Short to medium term, they get away with all of it. I mean, the thing that sucks is, so first of all, China with Hong Kong, they're taking advantage of the COVID crisis because everybody is so distracted. All these other countries were so distracted just trying to deal with this that they knew that Hong Kong had become more of a thorn in its ass than it provides in benefits to the CCP. So they figured, all right, let's make our move now.
Which is, by the way, I am generally not a mainstream conspiracy person. However, if China did want to create something that would distract the entire world for a bit while they did this and ended the riots that were definitely starting to get more mainstream on the news, I would say this was a perfect thing for them. That said, I also believe that it's probably just a natural thing, but they definitely took advantage of a situation.
Yeah, no, I mean, they took advantage of it. I mean, others are doing the same thing too. I mean, it's arguably the Trump administration has done that with respect to the post office. But it's, look, in terms of, do they get away with it? I guess the thing that really distresses me and depresses me about what's happened with China is that China has been so much smarter about this than the Soviet Union ever was. I mean, China has co-opted our elite. I mean, co-opted the elite globally, influencers. I mean, look at the whole thing with the NBA. Now, in Hollywood.
Look at every film that comes out. Every film that comes out has to be China censored before it's released.
Right, exactly. And here's the thing, you know, there were some people who were involved with the China hustle who, by the time it was released, were nowhere near it because they'd taken in investment from China. And so that all comes with very visible, obvious strings. And the fact that, and this is where I go with, you know, when back earlier in the show when we were talking about how everybody's thinking so short-termist. I mean, like, you know, we all have to live in this world, and, you know, many of us have kids or grandkids. I mean, fuck, like, shouldn't we show some restraint? And I mean, you know, and LeBron, look, I have a lot of respect for LeBron James as a social activist in the US, but, you know, frankly, you know, on the whole China thing, I mean, when he just sold the fuck out, I mean, it's so depressing, you know. He's
got a contract with Nike, and, you know, Nike's largely in China.
And that's the problem. Everybody has their price, but eventually people will be glad to take the payment. And this is the thing that really drives me crazy, because if you look at, you know, I would love to create some bumper stickers that say support communism, shop at Walmart. You know, and put that all over red states. But people really don't think about this stuff. And you're right. So I'm sure you've meditated a lot on this particular subject. Let's leave everyone with something a little hopeful. What if you were given the power to fix all of this? What would be the thing that you would do? What would you recommend Elizabeth Warren do?
Well, I mean, my problem with Elizabeth Warren is the demagoguery. I honestly feel like she's, you know, she talks about the high road, but she took the low road.
Well, let's set Elizabeth Warren aside and just go, like, you have a magic wand. What would you do?
Right. You became Elizabeth Warren. You're now in her body and you can make decisions. What would you do?
So we're talking about China alone, or
no, just in general, like a lot of these problems that you highlighted, particularly with China and like just, you know, the stock market and everything. Just if you can give us kind of a bullet point of things that need to happen for all of this to start getting fixed.
To start writing the economy, I guess.
Okay. Do you always end on this kind of question?
Generally, yes.
Hey, we're just kind of curious.
Look, it's either this or you got to tell us what's going to happen with AI in 50 years. So either one of those, man.
All right, look, I'm going to say something that's going to sound trite and of the moment, but then I'm going to explain that I think there's a real difference. Okay, I go back to, I think a lot of short-termism is driven by insecurity. There needs to be more of a net. I mean, people need to feel like there is fallback position other than, you and your family are totally wiped out. I think Obama was, and I didn't quite get it at that point when he focused on healthcare, number one, and said, this is really about the economy. But I think, when you look at the rise in healthcare costs, I think that's one reason that wages have not kept up. It's because employers have to keep paying that. And that's one symptom of, at least in the US, that's one element of the anxiety, like getting sick, wipe you out. So, why don't you go out there and, grab as much money as you can today, elbow everybody else out of the way, punch them in the face. I think there's a whole lot of that in our society that's feeding these behaviors. And, we know there's no middle class, or there's very little middle class left. So, you're not worried about going from upper middle, just to middle. You're worried about going all the way down. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, the thing that really distresses me, we're seeing this in California. The teachers union came out the other week with respect to schools that are not opening. It's county by county, and if your county's on the watch list, schools don't open. But schools can individually apply for waivers. And so the teachers union came out and said, we're against granting waivers because that's going to favor good school, or it's going to favor wealthy schools and private schools. And, what I think is that, like, inequality is a big problem and this insecurity is a big problem. But man, when we're at the point where we're saying, you know what, we're going to solve inequality by saying all of you are fucked, and now we're going to fuck all of you too. So your kids, these kids are fucked. All kids should be fucked. Like, we've lost our way. And that is the solution. So I don't have a solution for, for Joe Biden or for Elizabeth Warren. But I do believe we have to try to ratchet down the anxiety we all feel. But we have to do it with the mentality that's, it's not like, we're just going to, this crab mentality of grabbing everybody down and pulling them to the lowest common denominator, because guess what? People who don't want to be pulled down have mobility and will leave and will not buy into the system. So,
well, I think that instant gratification thing, like short-term mindset, I mean, it's just embedded in our culture in a lot of ways. And it's not just in the investing side, it's in culture in general. So that's going to be a tough one to crack. But Andros, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I put a little thought into this, and my feeling is, because what you seem to be dancing around is universal basic income, right? Where if you make under a certain amount of money, you get enough to live on, and they say that disincentivizes people to work, but I don't believe that at all, because nobody really wants to sit it. I mean, some people will. But for the most part, people want to feel productive. So I think there needs to be that. I think there needs to be free healthcare in the United States. I think that the United States needs to start paying people to go to medical school and taking immigrant doctors and giving them citizenship if they practice here over a certain amount of years. I think that we collectively definitely need to put a safety net in place. And we need to give free internet to everybody in the country. And we need to create something like the WAP during the recovery of the Depression, where we start building infrastructure and hiring Americans to do it. It's like those things alone, I think, would start to change the reality of the country. Do you see anything economically wrong with those particular ideas?
Well, I mean, I think UBI could be done in a way not to disincentivize work. Like it could be, it could be that you'll get even more if you're earning at least, this much. So you could,
sliding scale.
Right. You could build in the carrots. Can it be, I mean, the one thing that really bothers me about it, not the one thing that bothers me, but I mean, I'm of the belief that debt is a problem for this country. And I mean, I was kicking and screaming as loud as I could, not that anybody listened or cared, but back when we enacted the tax cut in 2001, and again in 2003, when we were already fighting two wars. But the reality is we've got, I think the latest numbers officially about 20, the federal and state debt now exceeds GDP. Those debt figures by a decent margin. Those debt figures exclude Social Security. I don't know where the money, where some of the money, comes from is part of the problem. But of course, the longer we perpetuate the system, the harder it becomes to right it. Now, the one principle, I mean, and I've thought a lot about this living in California. I'm okay paying 50% total taxes, right? Like, I mean, I'm a high earner. I'm okay paying half, all in. Right now in California, last year I paid 52. If this new tax legislation passes, I'd probably pay 54. And I'd feel morally like that's bullshit because, especially in my business, it's very litigious. If we really mess something up and I lose a lawsuit, like my family we lose our house, we have nothing. We start over. And it's not like the government ever says, oh, we've paid all these taxes over the years, here's your money back. And I think a lot of people who are business owners, take similar risks. So I don't think it's right all in for people to have to pay more than 50% in taxes. So I think if we can manage things within that framework, look, the estate tax, that should exist. The threshold, which you start paying, it should be a lot lower. I mean, that whole thing of not, of exempting estates from, exempting sizable estates from the estate tax, I think is bullshit. I mean, it's like if you're lying on your deathbed and the last thought you have is, oh, I really wish I could have passed more money along. It's fuck you. That's not a life. Not a life to live. I don't have a problem with that. I think there is some low hanging fruit. Capital gains tax rates should go up, but I do really worry about the fiscal situation. I don't know. We've dug a real hole for ourselves, and it looks by all from everything I can tell, we're going to continue to dig it. So,
well, let's kind of finish up here because I know you're on a schedule, and And I know that wasn't exactly what Andros wanted with the super high energy, exciting, positive ending, but I think it's okay because it's realistic and honest. And so again, we've been speaking with Carson Block, the Chief Investment Officer of Muddy Waters Capital. And so usually what we do to actually officially close the show, though, Carson, is to ask you, what are you geeky about right now? And this can be anything. Like, we like to know, like, are you watching Netflix? Are you watching Hulu? Like, what are you watching? What are you geeky about? What's your passion? What are your hobbies? Those kind of things.
Well, I just started watching The Watchmen.
That's so good.
Andros watched it. I haven't seen that yet.
So good. Did you read the comic? Did you read the graphic novel?
No, I had no idea about the comic in the backdrop until after a few episodes. I was like, wait a second. I looked it up on Wikipedia, so I got that there was a novel. And but yeah, it's just incredible because it's so 2020. Like everybody's wearing masks, and but the cops are black. And it's just, but there's this real dynamic. I mean, it was so intended for 2020 that it's really eerie.
Yeah, in fact, the opening scene, it shifted the needle a little bit because it takes place during the Tulsa race riot, and where this really affluent part of Oklahoma, where Black people own businesses, and it was called the Black Wall Street. One day, a bunch of Klansmen went in there and just killed everybody, essentially. It was a slaughter. And as I was watching this, Watchmen takes place in an alternate reality. And I'm thinking, oh, that's an interesting alternate reality narrative. Really? I had no idea. And I'm pretty progressive. I know about a lot of this type of stuff, but I had no idea about that. It was incredible.
Ditto. No, I had no idea, until the show created publicity around it. Like, I had no idea that happened either. There's a lot of, history that we don't get. Because history is written by the winners, I guess. But
Bill Barr said that recently, which fucking terrified me.
What's that?
Bill Barr, the Attorney General, said that recently in an interview.
Well, what else is he going to tell himself when he goes to bed, right?
My question is not that. What is he going to tell himself when he goes to jail? And that's what I'm, bam.
Part of me hopes that these people get prosecuted and see prisons, but, there's also something to be said for, let's think few elections or, more than another election down the line. And if we do that, does this make shit better or worse? I mean, the one thing, this is way far afield, but I was, I'm a fan of President Obama in many respects, but I think the one thing that you can really say, if you're asking, well, was he an effective president or not? Was he good or not? Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think you have to look at Trump here and say there were certain things that, where Obama wasn't effective. I mean, you can't blame Obama for Trump, but, the thing is, so long as we perpetuate this cycle, like we're, Israelis and Palestinians just trying to, kill each other all the time, we can't get past it. So do we go after these grifters for their crimes in office? I mean, I want to, but then maybe the pragmatic, patriotic thing is to say, fuck it, we need a new paradigm here. And we need to stop, pursuing this cycle of political, it's not vengeance, it's justice, but it would be perceived on the other side as vengeance.
Of course.
So maybe the outcome is the right outcome for the long term.
When wearing a fucking mask becomes politicized, you're in trouble. It's like, and I think, to Obama's defense, I agree with you. I mean, he ratcheted up the deportation policy incredibly more than any other president. However, that said, I also feel that he was in a position, being the first Black president, that he was under such a microscope that if he made any radical moves, they would immediately go for, he's an angry Black man. And I think that that it didn't matter because they painted him that way anyway. And I think that Trump was the pendulum swinging the other way. But I also feel that this is the Civil War still playing out. It never ended. People think it did, but it hasn't.
4 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that was accurate. But yeah, I agree with you in that conclusion.
I feel the same way. 4 years ago, I didn't feel that way, but right now, yeah, I'm starting to. All right, Carson, thank you so much for being on the show.
Wait, real quick, Justin, what are you geeky about?
What am I geeky about? Good question. Man, I haven't really gotten too geeky about too much stuff. I've been watching a lot of Carson Block interviews to prep for this, to catch up on some of his stuff, and I rewatched the China Hustle. But that's really it right now. I've been busy doing work. But what about you, Andros?
I just finished Umbrella Academy Season 2 on Netflix, and that show I'm very impressed with it. I hope they don't pull an OA on it and pull the plug. But the show is very fun and one of the best superhero type movies. Shows that I've seen in a while. So highly recommend it, Carson, after you're done with Watchmen.
All right. Thanks.
So Carson, thank you so much for being on the show, man. This was quite an honor.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Carson Block, everybody. That was an amazing interview.
Yeah.
Man, you scored that. You scored that interview with him.
Yeah, I mean, we got Dan David on the show, and they share the same representation. So it was we were able to get Carson Block because of how great our interview was with Dan David. So
nice.
If you haven't listened to that one, go back and check out the Dan David interview. We posted it in May 2020. So it shouldn't be too far back from this one, but go find that one, because that also gives some more backdrop on this whole China hustle story and the Chinese stock fraud that's been going on. So there's a lot of background that you might want to listen to if you have not yet heard that episode.
That's right. And I don't know what episode that was. I'm trying to.
It was one of them. It was an episode.
It was an episode that happened a few months ago.
The title has Dan David and the China Hustle in the name. So if you, I'm sure you could find it if you use those terms.
Nice. Anyway, we are doing some reshuffling of just like our website and stuff like that. So we had a small issue with the site, and so
with the hosting company.
Yeah, and it was a matter of we just pissed off the wrong people, and they just.
I know, right? Yep.
Yeah, something. I don't know. No, but
we get it. We get what Carson Block is going through, because we're constantly pissing people off,
including our new listeners, which is why they eventually become old listeners. And that's why we only have 7 at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's exactly true.
So, man, in the next couple of weeks, we got some really good guests, and please leave a comment. Let us know how much you hate us. That's fine. And then maybe
leave a review. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially iTunes, Apple Podcasts. We love those reviews.
That's right. We should do some live some mean tweets one of these days.
We'll do it. We'll do it in a future news episode. We will read the reviews on the air.
All right. Well, until then,
we haven't really had any negative ones for a while. They've been mostly positive.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that is strange. But let's not break that. Let's not give anyone any ideas, please. And then please connect with us on our LinkedIn page, because we have. I'm going to try and be a little more active on it. I've been saying that, but fuck, man, life is crazy. It's like it's a hustle.
It's 2020, man. It's a weird year.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are the Marketing Geeks.
Stay classy.
Marketing Geeks, come on, bring your friends. We'll learn marketing from distant lands. Andros, Sturgeon, and Justin Womack. The fun will never end. It's Marketing Geeks.
Marketing Geeks.